Hello, back to the shop. Today we have some shenanigans planned, and we're going to take a look at the new Milwaukee right angle die grinder. So this one is an upgraded version of the old one, which we happen to have here, and we're going to do a compare between the two, and we're going to do a little bit of testing. Now let's get the new one out. Now, things of note, they say it's got more power than other versions, which is good, and the head is a little bit bigger. We could test the weights here actually on what this is. So it claims to be 1.3 pounds. I'm seeing 1 pound 4 ounces, 1 pound 5 ounces. This scale isn't, there we go, pretty consistent. I'm seeing 1 pound 5 ounces. And what we're going to do is we're going to check. It says it has a 20,000 RPM, which is actually dialed back from the 24,000 RPM of this one. Maybe they were finding that that was just too much speed with not enough torque behind it, so that might be how they're able to get a little more out of this. And it also appears as though the motor is definitely larger on this one over the other, and we could see that by, it's an about 2-inch diameter motor. This one's more like 1.5 inch or so. You can kind of see the difference there. So what we're going to do is we'll hook this thing up to our rig here, and we're just going to test the RPMs on both the ranges. This definitely does say 20,000 RPM. One thing I kind of like a little better is the trigger. It's made the tool a little bit more compact. This is pretty nice. It's got a nice feedback feel. I'll be curious to see how the variable speed feels on it. This was okay, but it's very much like an air tool, and I understand why they went with that, but it's not really something that, to chase the air tool market, you gotta kind of reinvent it. And I think they're more along the right lines here, whereas it looks like this, they very much kind of followed the air tool lead. So I'm gonna leave this on here for now, but let's just do some quick running. And what we have here is a power supply set to 12.4 volts, and we'll just see here. You can see you can change your modes. A little bit more tactile than the older version, which is good because you can't accidentally just get into it if you're holding the head. It actually takes a little bit of effort to push the button, which I actually kind of like. So let's not launch the collet everywhere. So I'll just remove that for now. And let's just spool this thing up and see how much current it draws. Full speed on 1. So 1 point, it's dropping down a little as it goes. About 1.6, let's say. That's the new version, high speed on 1. Alright, let's move over to 2, see how much current it draws. I'm going to go with about 2.4. This is just free loading, no load on it whatsoever. Let's go to 3. Let's call it 3.6. Going to 4. I'm going to go with 6.8. So this thing clearly gets more hungry as you go to the full power, which we'll probably see quite a bit more as we load it. Okay, now we'll go back to the old one and test how much current it draws. We've removed the collet and everything else, so this should be a fair comparison. Now this thing does have some time on it. It's a tool that's used in the shop, but for the purposes of what we're doing, I think we could go ahead and just compare this. I haven't beat the ever-loving snot out of it. Trust me. So speed 1 is 1.4. The old one was 1.6, or the new one's 1.6. This one, you just have a fairly easy to push button here in the top. We'll call speed 2 2.0. The new one is 2.4. Speed 3. Go with 2.8. The new one is 3.6. Speed 4. Pretty solid there at 3.4, which is literally half of what this new one's draw is at speed 4. So I'm really curious to see what we get into here with this. The old one weighs in at 1 pound 3 ounces, whereas the new one, as we said, right around 1.4. So the weight is almost identical between the two. We were getting 1.4, 1.5 on the new one. So that's pretty close. Now what I think we'll do is we will check the RPM of the new one in all the speed ranges. So we'll take our collet, put it back on here. Now something this new variant has that the old one did not is the ability to lock your collet, or I should say your shaft, which allows you to only need one wrench. So if we look at it here, there's a button right here, and that locks the shaft, much like a lot of grinders do or what have you. So now we can take the provided wrench, which I do have to say is smaller than the older ones, thickness wise. So now we have this on. I'm going to take the tool off so we don't destroy it, because this is, it's rated for 25,000 RPM, but we'll just leave the tool off for now. Then we don't have the wind drag from it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our Veeder root tachometer, and I'm just going to shine it right down at the mandrel here, and we'll see what for RPMs we get. So we're right at 6,000 RPMs on speed 1. Alright, going to speed 2. Let's see what we get. I think we could safely call that right at 10,000 RPM. Let's go speed 3. We're right at 15,000 RPM. Speed 4. I do like that that button takes a little bit of effort to push. So we're right at 19.5, just shy of the 20,000. Not surprised by that. normally the tools, once you start getting other things on them, you start putting a wind load on it and you don't have it exactly right. Yes, we could put this on here, but I found I get a little bit more reflection when I try and put it right on the mandrel or the collet nut, and I get a little bit better reading. So as long as we test both the same, hey, we're horseshoes and hand grenades here. Okay, so we're going back to speed 1, the old one. Let's see what we got. So speed 1 is right at 10,000 RPM. Going to speed 2, which is where speed 2 of the new one is. I'm gonna call that, it was 14.9 just before I left go, so we're gonna call that 15,000 just because it was 14.9. Going to speed 3. I suspect this is going to be 20. Was indeed 20,000. Speed 4, let's see how close we can get to the 24,000 advertised. 23.8, so you can see that they're just a little bit lower than their advertised RPM. The new one being shy a little as well. So either way, this thing is faster. If you're running it without much load and you need the speed, something to keep in mind. I am suspecting once we go and put a load on these, which we're going to do right here, we're going to start seeing something drastically different. Now, to put a load on Scotch lock, I'm going to go ahead and use this 60 grit flap wheel. Now, this shouldn't have as much wind resistance as this. We can play around with this depending on how the results look, but I think this is going to give us a little bit better representation of what we got going on here. So let's fire our scale back up. Now, in theory, the scale should show lighter as we go because we'll be removing some material. But what I'm going to be curious to see is how much load and RPM we can make this thing dip until it cuts out. This is going to be a lot of things to hold at once, so let's see what we get. So I was seeing about 17,000 RPM. Once it cut out, I did not get a chance to see what the current was or the force. So let's run that again. A little too fast. So we could get into it about 1.5 pounds of force. And you saw we were getting about 20 amps there. That's probably taxing the leads that I have here, but we'll keep going with this. So that's full out. It dips down and cuts out at about 17,000. We saw 20 amps and 1.5 pounds. Or 1 pound 5 ounces. Now let's change out the collet again and see what we get on the new version. Okay, so we got our contraption here on the new version and we're ready to go. So first test, I'm going to see how many RPMs this thing's at when it cuts out, and then we will take a look at our scale and our meter and see where it cuts out at. So here we go with this RPMs. So I think we were getting down to about 10,000 RPM on the Veeder root. It still says 6,800, but I didn't let go of it quick enough there, and I think we have 6,800 or 10,000 RPM. So about half of the RPM that it has. Okay. Now, let's see how much current and how much pound force we can put down on this thing. So here we go. One thing I should make note of is this new one has a work light built in, which you can see here is actually quite nice. So let's get into this and see what we got. So I think I could probably routinely hold it at about 1 pound 9 ounces. Yeah, we can hold it there at 1 pound 9 ounces, and we're seeing about 24, 25 amps. Now this should run better than this on the new batteries. I have not come up with a rig yet to throw some current testing on it, but with the restriction of these leads, we saw that current and that force. Now, with just the force on our side, and a new high output 5.0 battery, let me see how hard I can push down on this workpiece and not get this thing to stall. We got a significant more amount of force on that, so let me play around and see where we can maintain and go from there. So I would say right around the 6 pound range of force, we are leaning on this pretty good. Now we'll do the same test to be fair to the old one. I knew I had a pretty good current restriction here in these leads, and I'll work on getting something else that we could play with. But I wanted to show an apples and apples comparison with currents, and then we can maybe do something to try and sample the current off the batteries. I gotta work on that though for future videos. Okay, so we had 6 pounds of force, about like that, on our workpiece with this 60 grit pad. Let's see what we can do with the old version and the high output battery. Not as much. So I'd say I could probably do about 3 pounds 5 ounces. So all that being said, these are two pretty different tools. You have some current ranges loaded. We were seeing 25 amps. I had to kind of be careful because this is a 20 amp supply. I can't get too rowdy with it, but figured we'd push it and see what happened. And we're right at the 20 amps on the old one. Speed ranges on the new one, we have 6,000, the old one 10. You can see them go up through here, and it looks like the new one cuts out around 10,000, the old one cuts out around 17. And we have the 3 pound 5 ounces that we can exert force, and we can get up to 6 pounds with this new version. So all that being said, the new version of the die grinder is quite a bit better than the old, and I think this is more in line with the tool everybody kind of wanted. So I'll be pretty excited to get this thing into use here and see how it works. You'll probably see it in the background of videos where we build things. Still going to use the old version, but it's going to be for more lighter duty type things. Played around with our scale, played around with our power supply, and while the numbers that we got might be a little subjective, it at least gives us an idea of what these tools are doing. Hopefully this was interesting. I enjoy playing around with things like this. There's a few nice things they did on the new version. I like that the push button is a little harder to push. It's not something that you can easily bump while you're using the tool. I like the new trigger assembly. I think that's going to be a little bit nicer to work with. It's nice that they have the shaft lock to make changing out collets and burrs and everything else a little bit easier. And I think the addition of the LEDs on the end of it was very nice. So while we're playing around here, let's just see what the specs of our LED are. And all that we're going to do here is we're going to just pull the trigger and we're going to light the LEDs up. You can see at about where your workpiece is, you're going to have 4K amount of light, of color temperature, and you're going to have about 600 lux or so to illuminate your workpiece. Now, 600 lux is not a lot of light, but the nice color of 4K, and honestly, if you're in a tight spot and you're up close, you can see it fades out very quickly, but this is where you're holding the tool. So it's going to light up your workpiece very well and do a good job. That 4K lighting is a nice thing. It's a little bit warmer color tone than the more harsh 5K that we see, or 6 on a lot of other things. So just something to look at. Not super bright lighting, but it is lighting all the same. Hopefully this was interesting. I tried to look at a few things that maybe weren't looked at before, and we're in the development of doing some different ways of testing things. Hey, the more tools you get out and play around with, the more fun it is. So as always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.